Let's do a little bit more review on opposites and absolute values to help us compare and order integers. So let's review our integer poetry. Opposites are easy, just switch the sign or go the same distance on the other side of Mr. Number Line. An absolute value is happy, it feels like a hero, because it's the positive distance of the number from 0. So if we're going to look at the opposite of 8, 8 is going to be located over on the right-hand side of 0 at positive 8, moving positive 8 to the right. So to find the opposite of that, we want to move that same distance of 8, but to the left, which will put us at negative 8. You just switch the sign. Now remember, this is how we ask for the opposite, with a negative sign outside of parentheses. So this one's asking for the opposite of negative 3. So if you're here at 0, negative 3 is to the left of 0, 3 places. So we need to go to the right of 0, 3 places. So the opposite of negative 3 is positive 3. What about the absolute value of 7? Remember, the absolute value is happy. It feels like a hero. It's the positive distance of the number from 0. So it's always going to be a positive number. So if we look at 7, 7 is located right there on the number line. It already is a positive distance of 7 from 0. Therefore, it just remains 7. These lines are how we ask for absolute value. And if we want the absolute value of negative 5, we're going to find it on the number line, which is located right here. And it's got a distance of 5 from 0. Therefore, the absolute value of negative 5 is 5, because distance is always positive. Now let's see if we can compare, and we can find greater than, less than, or equal to based on finding the value of these opposites. So look at A. It says negative 1. That's just a negative 1. The other number says the opposite of negative 1. So this value right here is actually positive 1. Well, a positive number is farther to the right on the number line, therefore it is greater. So positive 1 is greater than negative 1. For B, we've got positive 1, and then we have the opposite of negative 1. Well, the opposite of negative 1, switch the sign, becomes a positive 1. Therefore, those numbers become equal. Let's look at C. We've got negative 1 and the opposite of 1. The opposite of positive 1 is negative 1. Therefore, those are also going to be equal. D, we have positive 1 and the opposite of positive 1. So first we need to find the opposite of positive 1, which is negative 1. And we need to draw our arrows. The positive 1 will be greater. It's farther to the right on the number line. Then we've got negative 2 and the opposite of negative 3. Well, the opposite of negative 3 is going to be positive 3 because you're switching that sign. And a positive number is bigger than a negative number because it's farther to the right on the number line. Let's review our energy poetry one more time. And then we're going to put these groups of values in order from least to greatest down below. It says opposites are easy, just switch the sign or go the same distance on the other side of Mr. Number Line. An absolute value is happy, it feels like a hero because it's the positive distance of the number from 0. So remember, anytime you have these opposite signs, that's almost like an operation. You need to actually find what that value is. So I'm going to, below each number, write the true value that it represents. So negative 3 stays the same, 7 stays the same, but that next number is asking for the opposite of negative 6, which is positive 6. Then we've got 0. Then we have the opposite of 7, which is negative 7. 5 gets to stay the same. It's not asking you to do anything to it. And then the opposite of negative 4. The opposite of negative 4 is positive 4. So now that I know all the real values, I need to order them from least to greatest. So I'm going to start right here with the opposite of 7. The opposite of 7 has a value of negative 7, and that's the lowest number we've got there, followed by negative 3. And then we have 0, followed by the opposite of negative 4, which is 4, followed by 5, followed by the opposite of negative 6, And then lastly, we've got 7. So that can get really confusing when we're ordering these numbers because their values are a little different. Let's try B. In B, we're finding the absolute value and the opposites of some numbers. So I'm going to find all their values first. The absolute value of -3 is 3. The opposite of -2 is +2. The absolute value of 1 is 1. -4 stays the same. -1 stays the same. And the opposite of -6 is 6. So ordering these from least to greatest, I've got this -4 as my lowest number, followed by this -1. Nothing happened to either of those numbers. Then I'm going to go with the absolute value of 1, which is +1, followed by the opposite of -2, which is 2. Then the absolute value of -3. And lastly, the opposite of -6. Try C on your own and pause it, and then check back for your answer by pressing play. Go ahead and check your work for that now. I do want you to notice here and here, we have an opposite sign outside of the absolute value. So you're first going to find the absolute value of what's inside the absolute value sign, which is always going to end up with positive numbers. And then you're taking the opposite of that. So anytime you take the opposite of an absolute value, you're always going to end with a negative number.